So everybody's been asking me Brazil, where did Brazil come from? And actually Brazil, I say it like this, for 19 years I've held Brazil in my heart, but for 17 years I've been faithful with what was in my hands. Thailand, Myanmar, Pakistan, Indonesia, Southeast Asia. And actually, the first time I ever heard about child exploitation was from some missionaries from Sao Paulo, Brazil. I was in between my first and second year Bible school. I was in my church, and I was home for the summer, and a Brazilian missionary came and talked about the 300,000 street kids in Brazil. Talked about how at that time that they would massacre the children, that they'd line them up and just do massacres because they were just everywhere and there was no getting rid of them. That there was more kids in the streets than there was food in the dumpsters, and that you could see 5-year-olds sniffing glue, not just because they're hooked on drugs, but to actually kill the hunger pains because they were so hungry. And I heard all of this, and I just started to weep. Tears just started to stream down my face. And at that time, my pastor's wife came over and said, "Lana, what do you want to do for the Lord?" And out of my mouth said, "I want to work with children internationally." And I actually said, "I want to work with exploited children internationally." And I knew, I was only 23 years old, and I knew in my heart, like, that's what I wanted to do. So I prepared. I was going to go to Sao Paulo. I was going to work with the street kids in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And that was my goal. That was my destiny. So I set my face to Brazil. At that time, I was working with some missionaries, and they said, "Okay, we want to start these rescue homes, and our whole vision is going to be prevent, rescue, heal." And the first one's going to be Thailand, second one's Mexico, third one's Africa. I don't even remember the fourth one, but the fifth one was Brazil. And I said, "I will commit 2 months to all these nations, but when I get to Brazil, I will live there. I'm supposed to work with the street kids of Brazil." That was my goal. But 2 months came, and I fell in love with the children of Thailand, and I knew I couldn't leave them. 2 months turned into 6 months, 6 months turned into a year and a half into everything. The missionaries handed me all the children and the homes, and so I became mama to 52 kids at 24 and a half years old. And at that point, I knew I couldn't leave. Every year for 17 years, I'd ask God, "Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it now? Is it now?" Every year I'd hear, "Not yet, not yet." And then at the beginning of this year, at the end of last year, I was just praying. I actually read a book called Highway to Hell from Matt Roper, and he talked about Brazilian children trafficked along a certain highway, which is so crazy because I live on a highway. It's bound to be the #1 child trafficking highway in Southeast Asia. And so I heard about this same exact highway in Brazil. In all these stretches and all these miles, there's kids sold along every mile, and actually not just trafficked, but selling themselves and prostituting themselves. And I read this book, and I just wept, and I said, "God, I can't wait for the children of Brazil anymore. Like, I can't wait. I need to do something now." And at the end of the year, I was praying and just praying about the children of Brazil, and I heard this scripture, "Behold, I do a new thing. Before it springs forth, shall I not tell you? I will make a way in the wilderness, and I will make rivers in the desert." And I knew what he was talking about was Brazil, that he was going to do a new thing in the nation, that he was going to do a new thing for the children. Our motto is prevent, rescue, heal. And I knew that we were going to do something along these lines in the nation of Brazil, that it would be a little bit different, but we would take the same thing that we've been doing for 17 years on the Thai-Burma border and in Southeast Asia, and we would take that model, and we'd take that pattern, and we would take it to Brazil. So we went on our spy trip in June of 2018, and we went from place to place, and it was the craziest thing because I've been doing this for 17 years, and I don't think I've seen what I saw in Brazil. And in Thailand, children are trafficked and they're sold. But what I saw in Brazil is children freely selling themselves for rice and beans, selling themselves for cell phone minutes, selling themselves, freely selling their bodies. Even I've heard of a little 5-year-old girl selling her body for a banana for her brother. I hadn't seen it to the degree that I saw in Brazil. Everyone says that Thailand's the #1 in the world for children involved in prostitution, for child trafficking. But when we went, I took my Thai daughter, and she's been with me since she was 14 years old, and now works on staff with me and has been doing this for 17 years alongside of me. And she said the same thing, "Mom, I don't think Thailand's #1. I think Brazil is. I think somebody got their numbers wrong." And that's what we saw. The first place we went to was a community in Rio, and we were in there, and they were starting to tell me, these people that worked in that community, they're starting to tell me how there's this 12-year-old girl. She's sold her body since she was 9, and now the family is going to church and getting their life together, but they can't they can't stop this little girl from selling her body. That's what she's used to. That she would, since 9, she's been selling it for rice and beans, for food. So she's used to whatever she needs, just offering her body. So from 9 to 12, that's what she was doing. And so she said, we're going to go meet her, we're going to go see her. And they also said that she was locked into her little 1-bedroom shanty because basically she did something with the traffickers or got them mad in some way. And so they said, if we ever see her again, we'll kill her. And so for 6 months, she could not leave her own 1-bedroom shack house. And but then they said during that time, they said they saw the drug traffickers go in and out and use her. And at the end of it all, they made some kind of arrangement either for her sister or for her. And she got a big screen TV out of it all. And so we walked into this 1-bedroom shanty and saw this big screen TV that's the same size as the room, the whole entire room. And we knew that there was somebody's body, some young girl's body, in exchange for this TV. I knew what that TV meant. And I looked around, we met the girls, we saw them, I knew. And so, but we were walking out of this place, and I asked my Brazilian counterpart, I asked our Brazilian team, one of the people from our team, I just said, how come when you were telling me about this little girl, and from 9 to 12 she's had to sell her body for rice and beans, and she's had to sell her body for food, you guys were telling me this story and nobody was crying, like they were emotionless, nobody was moved. I said, I don't understand. Did I misunderstand the translation? Did I misunderstand something? And my friend looked down and said, no, you understood. And I said, then why wasn't anybody crying? Why wasn't anybody moved? And that now this 12-year-old girl, that's all she knows. She doesn't know how to not sell her body for something that she needs. And again, he just looked down and said, well, because it's normal. Said it's normal in Brazil for children to sell their bodies for food, for school supplies, for whatever they want, for whatever they need. It's normal for them to sell their bodies. And for one moment, just rage came up in me, and I just said, it's not normal. It's not normal that a child needs to sell their body for a basic necessity and a basic human right of every child. A child should be free to play. A child should be free to eat. A child should be free not to worry about, I need to give my body to get something in exchange. That's my basic right as a child. That's my basic necessity. Children should be provided these basic necessities and not have to sell their body, not have to make that choice at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old to choose between my body and hunger, or my body and something I need, or my body and something I want. And that was the beginning that just broke me in of something that was even greater, that it is normal in Brazil for children to sell their bodies for basic necessities. And that was just the first thing. The second thing, we went into this area. It was, again, just a very dark area, and they showed us some crack rooms, and they showed us this area, and they said, what happens is, this is all these kids are around, is drug addiction, prostitution, this is all they're around, and what happens is their mom or father takes them into these crack rooms, and then the drug dealers, give them the drugs, and then they pass out. And when they pass out, the drug dealers take advantage of the children. And so basically, they're molested and abused every single day. And for me, it's like, what hope do these children have? And that was just another one. We went into another area, and when we went in, they said that in this area, it's so bad, the poverty, the molestation at home, the abuse, the child prostitution. They said it's so bad that 1 to 2 teenagers in this area alone take their life every month. That there's kids as young as 11 are committed suicide just because of poverty, just because of the abuse at home. I heard a story that a 13-year-old prostitute that was on the street, she said, it's better for me to work on the streets and get paid for giving my body, because at home they take it from me and I don't get anything for it. So at least on the streets I get something for it. This is a 12, 13-year-old saying this. Another one, we literally physically met them, and we knew that they weren't okay, that they had just checked out mentally. And what we found out is the father had just systematically raped and abused them and actually impregnated his own 13-year-old daughter, and she had a baby from her own father. And from that, it just caused the daughters to check out and to mentally just check out a daughter having a baby from her own father. And this, in that area, is normal. They said this is normal. This is the thinking that some fathers even believe that they need to break in their daughters to prepare them for a life of sexual exploitation, for sexual, that's going to be their life, and that's how they're going to make money. So it's better for him to be the first one to sleep with their daughters. Like, these things were just so mind-boggling. One, I met with he was a child protection officer for Compassion for 9 years, and he said, Lana, the stories, they just get worse and worse. And he said one of them was the daughter was in the mother's bed holding the mother's hand, and it was either the stepfather or the boyfriend was literally raping, and she was 11 years old, and he was literally raping the daughter while the mom was right there, right in the same bed, and she was saying, Mom, make him stop. Mom, make him stop. But because the woman didn't want to lose, because the mom didn't want to lose the income from the boyfriend, from the stepfather, she didn't make him stop. Like, it's things like this where we're just like, we need to do something. I think one of the last ones that got me, though, we were in that same area of where she had a baby from her father, and that mentality. It's the northeast of Brazil, actually. And we were in that same area, and they took us to a town that's famous for child prostitutes. It's famous for child prostitution. And they took us to this town, and we went in, and we literally, this young girl, she's 13 years old, she literally just led us straight to her refrigerator and opened it up and said, I made enough money to fill my whole refrigerator, and literally showed us the income that she made from the day to buy enough food to feed her mom and the rest of the kids in her family. And I mean, just proudly stood in front of the refrigerator, proudly opened it up, and she said, and in that area, the whole village, that's the whole village. So this town is famous for young girls willing to sell their body just for food. I mean, all these stories, all these faces were just flashing by. And there was a point at the end of the trip where we were driving about 3 hours and from a town called Recife to Campina Grande, and we were driving 3.5 hour drive, and I was just looking out the window, and their faces were flashing before my eyes, and their stories were coming up in my ears, and I literally felt like I was having a heart attack. Like, I literally felt my heart breaking, and I was just crying. I couldn't stop crying. My heart was hurting, and I literally thought, I'm gonna have to go to the hospital. And I had my Thai daughter not next to me, and I grabbed her hand. I said, I can't stop crying. I see their faces. I hear their stories. I just can't stop crying. Help me stop crying. Please help me stop crying. And my sweet daughter, Not, that's been with me since she was 14, she put her hand on mine and she said, Mom, I feel like God's letting you feel what he has felt for these children for so very long. You just saw a little bit of what he has seen. He has seen this for so long, and the cries of the children have come up to his ears for so very long. And she said, and Mom, now it's time for you to do something about it. The children of Brazil need you here. And when we were landing, we went to Brasilia to meet with the Secretary of the Minister of Child Rights and Human Rights to talk about this, to see how we can help the nation of Brazil. And when we were landing, I said, God, I just need to know that you're with me. I just need to know that you're for this before we take on this nation, before we do this. I just need to know this. And I got this scripture in my heart. It's in Isaiah 43, and it says, you will come from the west, and your descendants will be from the east. My children are from Thailand and Myanmar, Burma. That's the east. You will come from the west. Your descendants will be from the east. And you will shout to the north, give up your daughters. And to the south, release your sons. He says, you will gather the children from the ends of the earth, for they were created for my glory, saith the Lord. And what I really believe God was saying to me is that we will shout and we will say, no more. You cannot do this to your daughters, Brazil, anymore. That your little girls cannot live lives of prostitution anymore. And you need to release your sons, your boys. They're not destined to be drug traffickers, drug runners. They're not destined to be pimps, and even them themselves selling themselves. They're supposed to be free. They are created for God's glory, for God's purpose, for God's destiny on the earth.